Hello, hello. Hiya. I'm just quickly sorting out the camera, so please do. This is always a thing with live stream things. They always seem like they're like, oh yeah, you can go live, and it's never quite abundantly clear that you're literally about to jump between things. So give me 1 sec while I quickly try and work out how on earth to move my camera around. Hi, how's everyone doing? If not, I can always just stare bang on at this screen. It's just because I've got 2 screens going on, so it may occasionally look like I'm appealing to a higher power as I get this sorted. Let me see if I can get this sorted. But in the meantime, hello, how are you doing? Hi, thanks for joining me for this. I guess I think I will just have to stare at the screen. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, how are you doing? If not, I can just do it from here. You just get a slightly odd angle. I'm realizing now the lighting is a bit rough and a bit whatever, but let's get this sorted. And let's see if I can do anything now about which webcam it is. If not, fine. But yeah, hi, how is everyone doing? I hope you're all keeping really well. I'm just faffing around with a camera. Please do ignore me. I always forget there's a screen before this, but I'm apparently so technologically illiterate that I'm always very much of the opinion that it's about to move and do something else before. So let's see what I can do. But I hope everyone's doing really well. Thanks for joining. This is a wild thing, particularly as I put it in a little bit more last minute. I'll talk about it a bit more on the stream, but December has been a lot. Hiya, I'm Maddie again. Yeah, but let's, I hope everyone's doing really, really well. Hi, thanks for joining on this. The lighting and everything is a bit wild. This room is a mess, but here we go. Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. It's wild. I mean, I'll talk about it probably more on the stream as we go, but it's still slightly nuts to me that there's a situation where I'm on 5k subscribers. That is strange, because I remember when I started, so many of the booktubers I really looked up to and was kind of routinely watching were kind of at about that level or above, and I was sort of like, oh yeah, maybe I'll start this off, and like maybe about 5 people will watch. So great, here we are. Hi Nikita, thank you so much for joining all the way from India. Time difference wise, I don't know if this is super early in the morning for you. I think it might be, but thank you, thanks for joining despite that, and for your very, very kind words. And welcome to my room. That is a mess. It's definitely looked better before, but we're slowly getting there. I hope you're all doing really, really well. I'm going to just sort of with the stream, just sort of talk a little bit, go through some of the questions of things that have come up. Some things that people already put in there, but also feel free to pop things in the chat as you go. Oh, okay, it's midnight there. That's not as bad. I was really worried this would be sort of 3 a.m. for you, and that'd be a sort of a really sort of intense way to experience my nonsense. But there we go. How is everyone doing? What's everyone reading? What are you up to? I'm going to tactically move back over here so you can't see the pile of clothes behind me. How is everyone keeping? It's a weird time of year over here in the UK because weather-wise is just pretty dire, and we're in the middle of a storm, so that's fun. Hence my slightly damp hair, because I've just come back in, and it's all kind of it's a lot happening. I feel this time of year for everybody involved is normally a bit of a weird period because everyone's knackered. It's so close to the end of everything, to the holidays, to whatever, and everyone's just a little bit run down, and I hope that's not what's happening for you. I was just out with a friend and I was sort of talking and realizing how many things have happened this year that mentally I've imagined were the year before or even earlier. 2024 has been that year for a lot of people I know, and so thanks for sticking by with thanks for sticking around despite my kind of slight mania of just it's been a year. I might be so yeah, for context on the on the comment there from Maivy in the books. I literally bumped into her today. And it was just this sort of moment of like, oh, hi, here we are in person, which is really fun. And actually, she holds the record for the first person who's recognized me in public, which again, tied to the whole 5K thing, absolutely something I never thought would happen. So that's surreal. I remember the first time I met Eric Carl Anderson over at Lonesome Reader for like a coffee, and it was just the weirdest thing of being like, this is Eric in the flesh. Like, when Eric stops talking, you can talk, Bob, because this is not a video, and he is a real person, and it's yeah, it's a fun experience. It's kind of a wild thing because I think so. There are quite a few BookTuber hangouts that have happened, and there have been sort of 3 that I've been to. And the really fun thing is getting to meet loads of booktubers in real life. And it's surreal because to some degree, so much of my experience of them has been, you know, just watching them and seeing them talk on my phone or on my iPad or whatever, and having them in real life in a bookshop or like across from you as you're having coffee is a really strange experience, but a really lovely one, because I think it's just a very nice community of people. So yeah, it's I know that there are other ones that happen outside of the UK as well. So yeah, it's always fun to see so many booktubers around and doing things. So yeah, here we go. I'm going to start going through a few of the questions that people submitted before. So my face will be very heavily lit for a moment because I'm switching tabs. I'm not ignoring you, I'm just on another tab. But let's go through some of the questions, and again, feel free to pop questions in the chat as you go. Okay, let's go from the very top here. Where is it gone? Okay, so let's do the first one. So I love this. This is a really funny one here, but from Animo Shoshin. After 4 years, are you sick of talking about the Booker Prize? Do you think you'll ever be sick of it? And this is a fun one at the moment because I am in the final stages of finishing the Booker project, as it has been, of reading the shortlists from the last 60 odd years. I'm about 30 books away, which sounds like quite a lot, but luckily a lot of the ones I've got left are quite short. And it's a little surreal because this is a project that was the reason I started my channel about 4 years ago. And not only did I think that approximately 2 people would watch it, I also thought that I would just sort of make a couple of videos, bounce and sort of say like, hey, cool, it's been fun, bye everyone. And somehow I'm still here. So to the question of whether I'm sick of talking about the Booker Prize, I'm surprised at how little I'm sick of talking about it. I'm still enthusiastic about it. I still love talking about it. Occasionally I have moments where I just want the list done because it's been a thing that's just been hovering in my head. Ooh, what happened with that light change there? It's just been something that's been hovering around in my sort of periphery for so long that actually the idea of not having that is both scary and feels quite liberating as an idea, to be able to drop the Booker for a little bit. I will still, the cruel irony of that will be that I will finish reading the shortlists, but I still won't have done most of the videos on said shortlists. So it will still dog me for a year or 2 afterwards. Never mind the actual Booker Prize shortlists and long lists for the International Booker and for the non-international Booker. So yeah, if I were sick of it, then it would be a really tricky couple of years. Maybe that'll come next year. I'm still very much passionate about it because I think I've also spent so much time reading and thinking about them that sometimes I forget I've actually not spoken about some of those things. So the 2009 video I put out recently, that's one where until recently I'd read all but one of the shortlist. So I'd kind of mentally been thinking about that shortlist for a long time. and then actually only once I finished the Sarah Waters book was in a position to be able to talk about the whole shortlist. So it's now I'm in a position where I can kind of, they'll come thick and fast, because of the 30 something books that I've got left from the shortlists, those probably cover about 15-20 shortlists, because I've done it in such a patchy way. So that means actually there are 15 or 20 shortlists that are not complete, that I could not do a video on if I wanted to, because I've not finished the list. So yeah, there we go. That's still very much to come. We'll see. And Mark, hello. To your question, did you cover all the international book ones? No, not yet. This is kind of the question for myself about whether I want to do that next year. Once I've finished, once I've read all of the shortlists for the non-international booker, whether next year I want to concentrate on the international. It's a lot shorter, as in the non-international booker is from 1969, and each shortlist is roughly 6 books, some slightly shorter, a few slightly longer, but for the most part 6 books. The international booker is that, but from 2016 or 17, so a significantly easier shortlist in that respect, set of shortlists in that respect. And so in theory, I could do that in the coming year. I'm not sure if I want to give myself another project immediately after doing this one, but it's an option. And I know from looking back, I've read the last couple of years of shortlists and kind of long lists as well. A few shortlists before, I've read maybe 1 or 2 books on the lists, so I've got a head start into it. And it might, I think I worked it out at one point that it was something like 38 books or something that I'd have to read to finish all the shortlists, maybe even less than that. So probably, actually, yeah, it would be less than that. So look forward to that. Another book project that might drive me slightly up the wall in the coming year. But there we go. But yeah, thank you, Mark. I do want to cover it, because I think the international booker is often slightly more exciting than the regular booker, and I say that because I think just having this breadth of international literature to be able to look at just means that some of the really exciting voices get to come to the fore. So really excited to potentially do that. I don't know how much of a break I need first. I've got a holiday in January, so maybe that'll be the thing where I come back after January, refreshed, hopefully, and thinking about what books I want to read, or what I want to do with my life. Generally, it's a week in Cyprus, so it might be quite nice and chilled, hopefully, and there'll be some winter sun as well. But yeah, there we go. We'll see. Nikita, thank you. So what are your thoughts on Samantha Harvey winning this year's Booker? It's been fun now that I've had a little bit more time to sit on it, because I think my last live stream was me live reacting to the announcement. And in the preamble before the announcement, I'd been talking about how Held or Orbital felt like the kind of books that might creep in there and actually take the win, despite being the less immediately flashy or showy books. They're the kind of the quiet underdogs almost. But what I found really interesting was seeing how many people absolutely loved Orbital or loved Held, and they had a lot of people who hated them as well, but or were fairly indifferent to them. But there were some people who really, really loved those books in a really special way. I can't remember exactly who it was, but somebody in the comments on both the live stream and I think on the Orbital video mentioned how the second they finished reading Orbital, no, I think it was before they finished reading Orbital, they already wanted to reread it. And I think that shows something. For me, it was probably my 3rd favourite in the shortlist, which is not a bad thing, because James and Stoneyard Devotional I loved so much that those were my top 2 of the list. But I think Orbital was such a quiet and heartfelt book, and I could see why it was so loved, and I really enjoyed it too. So I think actually history will be kinder to Orbital, because I think in this current moment it feels so strange to think about it up against a titan like Percival Everett with James, which then I think recently won the National Book Award, if I'm correct. So I think actually it's a book that might kind of win the long race here. I think in years to come, I think we'll look back on Orbital a little bit more favorably, because I think actually it's such a book of this moment while being quite timeless as well. So it's a book that is so what's the word? It's because it's so much about humanity and the world and all these other things. It's a book that seems like it could really be in any shortlist year and work. It has that, but there's a specific resonance, I think, with 2024, because this book follows a certain election in the US. It follows various conflicts across the world. It follows various humanitarian crises across the world at the moment. And it's one of those things where we're in a relatively dark time. I remember somebody a couple of years ago describing the state of the world as where we are now as being like that moment in a history book where all of the arrows start to converge, right? So where, you know, this crisis happens over here and there's an energy crisis here, and then there's a financial crisis in this place, and something else happens and a big historical event happens, and these arrows that start off over here start to come in like this. And without becoming sort of a doom scroller or naysayer or whatever, it's a concern. And I think in that context, and particularly the context, I think of Booker judging panel who I think I heard had various horrible life things happen to them this year. I think one judge lost a son, another judge lost a family member. All these horrible things happened to them. And so actually a very quiet, heartfelt book about coming together is probably what the judges and to some degree the world is going to respond to. But I see why people don't like Orbital. I personally think it's a really strong book. I don't know if it would have been my top choice personally. I think Stone Your Devotional and James were the top ones for me, and My Friends from the Long List by Hisham Attar. But yeah, it's still, regardless, I think it's a worthy winner. And actually, the fun thing, I'll do a video about this soon. I went to Waterstones in Piccadilly in London, where they've got the Booker Library set up at the moment. So it's sort of a mini exhibit, I guess, where they've got as many of the previously shortlisted and long-listed books as they can find, set up year by year across this part of a shop. And it's really beautiful. It's really, really well done. And the interesting thing is actually going around and seeing Orbital in the context of some of the other winners. It kind of makes sense, actually, because there are so many winners there, some of which I don't like, but quite a few winners there that actually were really, really spoke to a specific moment, or maybe felt like a weird choice in that year, given everything else shortlisted alongside it, but actually have proven their worth or their value in the long run. And so actually it's this is a very long answer to your question, Nikita, about Orbital. But yes, I think it's a worthy winner. And I think I would have only been upset by a couple of winners on that long list, but this is one. Orbital, I think, has a kind of unifying thing. And yeah, Nikita, I think that's totally fair. If the book didn't resonate with you, totally fine. I think there were so many books on that list that were really broad and varied in many ways. So lots of people who really didn't get on with Orbital loved something else in the long list. And that's fine. It's very strange. And actually, Ellen, I love what you've just written there. So I know it's different judges and the decisions aren't technically meant to respond to the previous year, but it does feel very, very different to Prophet Song. And I think that's nice. Yeah, that's a really great point. I hadn't thought about it in that context. But yeah, Prophet Song was such a dystopian, dark, but really hard going at times. And Orbital is, to some degree, comments on the dystopia, but tries to choose hope. And I think that's, it's nice to have that difference. And actually thinking about it, the last few years, who have we had? So there's Damon Galgut and Shuggy Bain, both quite dark, difficult books at times, but with a sense of hope, sort of, in them. Who else have we had? Seven Moons of Marley Almeida, that I thought was a little bit more optimistic and had some really lovely moments. It was really beautiful in passages. There was a whole part of Marley Almeida that just left me breathless. I thought was really stunning. I overall really enjoyed the book. Some parts I didn't quite understand where it was going, but there were passages in Seven Moons that I thought were so exceptional that I totally see why the judges, particularly on a third read, would pick it. So actually, yeah, it has felt quite nice to have some varied things. Sometimes with some book prizes, you do see, even though it's different different judges year on year, you get a sense that they're very stuck in a type of novel that they're looking for. And I think with the Booker, we often get some quite nice varied ones. Anyway, let's come back to other parts of the comments. So Kieran over at KD Books, hello. I've not been ignoring you. I saw you. I just wanted to finish the little Booker point first. Kieran asking, when is my Minecraft channel going public? I've played Minecraft approximately once and was very confused by it. I don't think it's my kind of game. I just sort of floated around a bit and hammered away at things, and I didn't really understand. I think I'm quite used to RPGs where I have to go and fight things, and so I got really confused in Minecraft that I wasn't fighting things. And yeah, there we go. But yeah, more comments here. Hi, Roz, over at Scally Dandling about the books. I think the impact of reading The Winner more than once will have worked for Orbital. I loved it. Yeah, absolutely. So the judges would have read Orbital and the rest of the shortlist 3 times by the time they chose The Winner. And I think Orbital's the kind of book where multiple reads do it better. Held is the one by Anne Michaels, is the one where I reread it because I could not remember what it was like when I read it in February. Came back and reread it and actually thought there was a lot more in there that I'd completely missed the first time. So I think rereading does do a great job here. Yeah. And I think particularly for a book like Orbital would have gone a long way. Hi, LT. Thank you so much for a very, very kind message there. Yeah, it's still wild to me that I've hit 5K. Hi for people who've recently joined the chat, by the way. I also want to just apologize for this lighting situation. I was trying to use, I've got like a little camera on my big screen, which is here, just above. I'm talking at my laptop here. And I thought I'd have a moment before I joined to connect to that. I apparently did, but I must have clicked through. So I'm currently yelling at my laptop as opposed to looking slightly up at the screen where it would have been slightly better camera focus. So instead you get this slightly sort of ephemeral, probably not the word. Yeah, and stuff like that. But there we go. Hello. Some more people in the chat here. Hi, Andre. Thank you so much. That's a lovely comment. Thank you. It's very kind. Book Songs and Other Magic. Hello. And yes, and I was talking at the beginning of this just about some of the BookTuber meetups and how lovely they've been. Just to be able to go and see people in person and to be able to sort of chat about some of these book things and just to sort of see them and be like, look at you, real person. And that's been lovely. And yeah. And on that note, actually, let's take the question from Kerry, Bookish Adventures in Wellbeing, and also a quick hi to Charles. Hello. Speaking of BookTuber meetups, I saw him at one recently. So Kerry's question: if you were invited to judge the Booker, which panel of BookTubers are you? I've just lost where I was. Which panel of BookTubers are you taking with you as fellow judges? So I, who would I take? So I remember thinking about this a while ago, and I felt like Kieran would be a really funny person to take with, partly because Kieran is just pure joy, but also because if Kieran and I agreed on a book, that would have to be the winner because Kieran and I disagree on most other books. So I think since I've known Kieran, I think we've agreed fully in terms of loving a book approximately twice, one being The Sea, and the other one I now can't remember. But there have been quite a few that I've loved and he's hated, or I've not really gotten on with and he's absolutely loved. So it would be fun. But I will say Eric Carl Anderson from Lonesome Reader, partly because he's a good friend and he is, honestly, you think he's lovely in his videos. He is the loveliest human. Absolutely adore that man. And I think he'd be great to be a fellow judge with me, not only because he's a friend and it'd be great to see him and have an extra reason to hang out with him, but I think he's also one of the most careful and sensitive readers that we have on BookTube. And I'm not just saying that, but I think I'm also in a book club with him is the context. And when he and I talk about books, often I'm just really blown away by the insights he has on books and the little nuances he's unpicked in something, or the thing he's noticed that nobody else noticed. And so I think he's just an exceptionally careful and clever reader. And so I think there'd be quite a few books that actually the rest of the panel might have overlooked that Eric would encourage us to look at again, and we'd probably gain something huge from that. So I'd really love to see him on there. Who else would be really fun? I think Alyssa over at The Nerdy Nurse, again, we often disagree, but I think she's a riot. And I think she's got an incredibly well developed reading sort of style, as in I think she really engages it with books in this really fascinating way of sort of pulling on various things that I find really interesting. Yes, Rosie with Ben was the one I was thinking of to come to next. Both Bens, actually, both Doom Antidote Ben and Ben Reads Good, who both of whom are brilliant people, and I think also very clever, astute readers. I think actually, I'm not just saying this because he's in the chat. Guilty Feet, I think, also has some incredibly well thought out reactions to books that I'm always really deeply drawn to. The same for how have I entirely forgotten his name, given that I saw a video of his earlier. Bookish, Brian at Bookish is another one. Greg from Supposedly Fun. So many people, actually. Most booktubers, basically. If I could, I think it'd be difficult to narrow that down to a panel of 5. Particularly if I had to be the chair, that would be the tricky bit. I think I might ask Alyssa to be the chair because I think she would keep us in order. And yeah, there are so many really astute, clever readers on BookTube, and I'm always just completely fascinated by the things they see in books that I completely miss. Yeah. And as Mark says, yeah, no Prophet Song with Alyssa. That would absolutely be thrown in the bin at the first meeting. Would just be Alyssa versus Kieran, just absolutely demolishing, like just fighting each other, maybe fist fighting over Prophet Song. So that would be great. That'd be good fun. Hi, other people who've joined the chat since I've been rambling. Let's just quickly say everyone's names. So hello, left-handed reader. Hello, lovely to see you. Hi, Rosie. I think I've missed someone further up. I think I said hi, Andre, earlier. And who else is here? There was somebody earlier. Oh yes, and sort of Umit as well from Turkey. Hello. Yeah, so I think that's probably who I'd pick. I don't know how I'd narrow that down. I think Eric is the one that I would be determined would have to be on that panel with me. Also because I think Eric and I see eye to eye on many books, so it'd basically be a surefire way of us getting our books in. Roz is very right that is too many men. Roz would actually be a fantastic inclusion to that as well. There are many great booktubers, and any of them I think would be grand for that. I was trying to pick people who I know that I would to some degree either completely clash with or see completely eye to eye with. So yeah, it'd be a fun one. That would be a tricky, very tricky one. I think it could be really fun. If it was non-booktubers, I think there could be some, because typically the interesting thing, right, is particularly for the non-international booker, a lot of the judges are, well, a few of the judges are in books or in sort of something directly related. They're either authors or they work in publishing or whatever. And then there's normally one slightly more rogue one where it's an actor, or for the international booker, we've got Beth Orton, the musician, who's great. And so I wonder who could be like the weird extra, I say weird, the kind of non-directly book person in this. Yeah, who could that be? I would want, it'd have to be someone like, I kept on thinking of some actors then, and then just thought, actually, I just have a crush on them, and that would be really awkward to keep doing booker panels with them. Who'd be a really fun, I'd love someone completely, I would love, oh, what's his name? Oh my God, how have I literally forgotten everyone's name who's ever existed? British comedian, Brummy, oh my God, what is his name? Joe Lycett. I would love to be on a panel with Joe Lycett because I think he would actually have some really fun inclusions as well. Yeah. Charlie mentioned Roz notices too many men. I think that's too many lovely people on a judging panel. I think there is a correlation with lovely people and readers generally, because I think reading encourages some form of empathy. It's not a given. I've met some readers who are awful, but you do get some. And yeah, I love the idea as Charles as the kind of grumpy edition where we're like, and off, yeah, and over to Charles. What do you think? I used to be, so there's a book club that I'm part of, my local bookshop, and what I love is there's a cohort of about 4 or 5 people who are. I don't think this is an age thing at all, but they are kind of in their 50s and 60s. And what I love is they come to book club ready to fight. As in, if they love a book, they are going to tell you all of the wonderful things this book does, and they will defend that book against anything. Equally, if they hate a book, they will say. And my favorite thing about that is that there's one woman who shall remain nameless on this, but I love her because every time she'll just say her opinion and absolutely not give a monkey's what happens next. So she'll just come in and, you know, people be like, wow, I thought the characterization was really beautiful. I thought this was really fun. I thought it was really engaging. And she would just say, I thought this was twaddle. I think this should be burned. And everyone around is like, okay, other opinions? And just it gives something to battle against or to push against. In a book club, which I think is so useful. Whereas I've been part of a book club once where it was a very cozy book. It was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry, and everyone loved it so much. And it's an incredibly cozy book. So actually, the comment was the chat was really minimal because all of us were just saying, "Well, yeah, it's great. We loved it. We thought the rat character was great. We thought this was lovely," and that's what we could say. So there we go. Cool. On those, let's go into some other questions. Let's pull those up. Cool. And there were 2 other questions from Anna Mo-Shoshin that I want to go back to. Can you share more about your pet sitting, how you got started, favourite pets, future plans? And the other question, if you had to be Bob the some other prize, what prize would you choose? So the dog sitting. So I'm very lucky in the sense that a friend of a friend, well, a friend ages ago introduced me to someone who had a dog sitting business and also does other things, including a market that I do on Sundays typically, and which also sells dog things. So I started sort of through her, and then ended up getting very heavily involved in doing lots and lots of it because I'm saving for a flat, and also I have books this way. I have books to feed, bookshelves to feed. So yeah, I started doing loads of that and ended up with lots of dogs who I see regularly, and that somewhat took over parts of my life where, particularly during the busy seasons when everyone wants to go on holiday, so the summer, I am sort of, it's wall-to-wall dogs. A fair few over kind of like other holiday periods, but particularly the summer. And so this summer, I was just drowning with dogs. It was great. I want to do more of it. There are lots of dogs I absolutely adore. The dog I was with recently was in a couple of videos. The beautiful Husky Chow. He, without naming favourites, probably is my favourite because he's a very chilled dog and is also just adorable. And also, I've spent far too much time with him, to the extent where I kind of like, he's not my dog, but for about 4 or 5 weeks a year, he's the dog I'm looking after, and I would very happily look after him if anything ever happened. Love it. Yeah. And then what was the other question, which I've now entirely... Oh yeah, if I had to be Bob the something otherer, and as Mark very rightly points out, Bob the Gillerer wouldn't be a good idea at the moment. Yeah, the Giller Prize controversy, I've only loosely caught up with what's happening there. I haven't gone full into trying to understand that, but it looks like it's become a bit of a mess, not only because, I think there is a valid criticism of prizes and where they get their money, and where most places get their money from. A book prize is going to need a substantial amount of investment to pay for the judges, to pay for promo, to pay for the prize sort of at the end. And it's weird because I think, if Waterstones, for example, runs a book prize, to some degree, Waterstones is pumping that money back into itself because it's also extra promo for the prize, right? And I think with the Booker, the Giller, whatever else, it's a strange thing because you generate lots of buzz about books, but that money doesn't necessarily come back to you. So they can't run on a kind of circular economy of, we make this amount of profits this year, and then next year we're able to run this thing with a prize. The booker doesn't really receive money from running the booker in the same way. It's kind of the plant from Little Shop of Horrors is just constantly needing more. And I think with that in mind, the whole Giller controversy was a thing of, where they accepted money from, and whether you agree with where they accepted money from or not, or whatever, the way they've handled it since, I think, has been pretty horrid from the little I understand of it. Just that Madeleine Tien, I think, has distanced herself from the Giller because of how they treated her, with, I think, both essentially sort of reassuring her that it would all be fine, and then reneging on everything they'd just said. And that really puts authors like Madeleine Tien, who had been outspoken about it, in a really awkward position. So from the little I understand of it, that's not great, which is a shame, because Canadian literature is often one of those ones that, a big US release gets that publicity, and the National Book Awards or the Pulitzer or whatever really drives a lot of focus to people checking out those books. The Booker does that for many, many authors. The Giller, I think, and I think there's another big Canadian one that I've entirely forgotten, but they do such a great job of bringing attention to particularly quite a lot of books that are that cover really important topics. I want to say Johnny Appleseed was one that did well, either in the Giller or something else. Some other big Canadian prize. And so it's clear that those kind of books about, First Nations people, or about many other stories in Canada, get an extra leg up because of something like the Giller. So it's really frustrating to see what they've been doing. Let's go back to the comments. Sorry, again, these are tangents on things, so please bear with me. Jennifer loves books. Book clubs are definitely more interesting when people have varying opinions. Yes, I love a good tussle, in not a physical one, but like a good disagreement in a book club. I think it's what they're for. And often that brings out more important questions, because sometimes it hasn't worked for someone because they didn't think it was authentic, and someone in the room can say, actually, this is incredibly authentic, or vice versa, that actually, yeah, you really liked this, but it's deeply inauthentic because of X, Y, Z. Ellen has said, yes, some of my colleagues want to start a book club, and while that's lovely, I think it'll be quite dull / we'll just keep cancelling it for not having read the book. I want interesting strangers. Yeah, I think that's it. And I've had my fair share of work book clubs, either ones that I've started or that I've been involved in, and it's a really varied thing, because I think, with a bookshop's book club or a set of friends or whatever, there is some degree of there are either enough people that some people could have not read the book and there'll still be 20, 25 people in the room talking about it, or it's a group of friends and there's a set of accountability. With colleagues, I think it's a weird one, because everyone is busy, and sometimes, depending on where you work, as I found, in my last job, I worked with a lot of people who were parents, and so this book club was great, but then all the parents were like, oh, sorry, I really want to be there, but I do not have time. I have 3 little ones, and quite frankly, they will not let me read. So I think it's always a difficult one with some of those things as well. So yeah, it can be a real situation of work book clubs can be great, or they can be really awkward because nobody has enough time, and everyone is already thinking about all the other work they need to do. So it can also not be the setting. Hi Amelia, hiya, thanks for joining. Hello. It's it's good to see you. And yeah, notifications for things like this are often weird. I sometimes find them way after the moment as well. But let's carry on with some questions. Read by Fred. On a cold, damp day outside when you just want to stay warm indoors and read a good book, what is your favorite dish to make for supper? This is particularly important given that the weather outside is frightful, and the fire is not delightful. The fire is not existent. This is the time of the year where I get really a lot more into soups and nice hearty rice dishes and bread things, just because I sort of eat my way to being warm for most of this season. So here we go. I'm getting there. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I on my way home, because I knew I'd be on the live stream and therefore might not have enough time to quickly make dinner, bought like a nice little curry on the way home, and I was like, this is exactly the season now where I'm very much ready for this. It's very, very good. Hello, other comment just here. Hello. Do you ever get the feeling that some readers go into books with the intentions of not liking the books? I sometimes get that feeling. 100%. I remember seeing a quote from Graham Norton from an interview he gave once. Hi Ben, in capital letters. Sorry. A quote from Graham Norton where he was talking about some people going to restaurants or going to the theatre or whatever and being so determined to have a bad time that they make it so, that they go in saying, oh, well, you know, it's not going to be as good as this, or, oh, well, look at the decor in here, and kind of starting at that place. And I've seen the same definitely with books. I think less so on BookTube, generally fairly open-minded place. I know that there have definitely been some books where I've gone in thinking this might not be my cup of tea. Sometimes I've been right, sometimes I've been surprised, and that's been lovely. I try to be as open-minded with that as possible and as positive going in of I don't know this book, it could do something special for me. The one example where I tried really hard and I was proven correct in not liking it was Boris Johnson's memoir. Whether you like the man or not, I'm not a fan, for many reasons. I started listening to his memoir, and the thing that frustrated me more than anything was I was going in there thinking, I want to hear what he has to say. I want to hear if there's any contrition or any new perspective he's got to offer on it. And I had to give up because so early into the book, he is quoting things, he's mentioning things that happened, but carefully leaving out information that he was involved in anyway. So he makes it sound like all of these magical things just kept happening, and wasn't that a shame? And I'm like, no, you were there. Like, you were there for all of this. How, like, where are you going with pretending that this is just some weird happenstance? So yeah, that's one where I've been proven right. But yeah, typically I've seen a lot of people go in being like, this is going to be garbage. And I think Klon makes the point there about a hate read can sometimes be quite fun. There was a book, well, there have been a couple of books that I've really early on just not enjoyed, and I've given it the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes it has actually changed my mind slightly on it, but I've sometimes persisted with a book because I hate it so much, and I just want to keep seeing that I was right, which is maybe not fair on the reader or whatever. But it's such a, it's, oh my God, it's so ridiculous sometimes. Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised. I also think sometimes I'm a bit of a sucker for if a book starts really well or ends really well, I often ignore or forgive a lot in the middle. And so I'm reading, oh God, what, I'm reading Iliwaka by Peter Carey at the moment. And it had such a strong opening that I know I'm going into this a lot more excited, even though it's a 600-page book. And I've been middling on some of his books in the past. So yeah, there we go. Here we go. So yeah, book songs and other magic. People like to prejudge. I'm a music teacher and the students are constantly doing it. Yeah, it's so interesting, I think, with going in with that expectation. Because I've seen it with people I know. On a side note, there's some, like a friend of mine is dating someone who is just like the world's most negative man, and I find it really difficult to speak to him. And I remember just kind of go to a restaurant or walking around and then being like, oh, well, this thing's going to be terrible. I'm like, well, of course it is. If you're going in thinking that this is going to be the worst thing ever, like, you are gonna hate it. So yeah, I sometimes think some people really go in and create that for themselves, not in a kind of manifesting kind of way, but in a kind of like, you've just really not been open to any of these experiences at all. Let's read the rest of these. So Ros Scandal and books. It's very kind. Thank you, Ros. I think a key Bobness is your positive readiness to find the good in a book. Sometimes to a fault, I think, where I'm so keen to find a positive that I maybe overlook that some of the books are, yeah. Yeah. Here we go. So Amelia, Mark, I hate Red Held and then in fact hated it. I love that. Yeah, fair. Held was such a divisive one in this year's list. I totally see why some people did not get on with it. I also totally see why some people loved it. Guilty Feet, yeah, Iliwaka is the second best Peter Carey book, and is saying Oscar and Lucinda is the best. I'm really enjoying Iliwaka so far. I think it's really strong. It starts with a really great opening where a man is 137, 139 years old, and he tells you from the very first page that he's an unreliable narrator. He says, I lie all the time, but I'm not lying about being 139. And that's I kind of love that. It's just so bold to be like, I'm going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you some absolute nonsense. And it's coming from a man who's 139. Great. Love it. Oscar and Lucinda, I really enjoyed. I thought that was really fun. Amelia, I'm already eating gingerbread. I don't care. With everything that's going on in the world, I really can't wait for a certain season anymore. I have to enjoy life on a daily basis as much as possible. I'm totally here for this. I think a lot of, there's a lot of judgment and sort of insult that's thrown at people who, really enjoy pumpkin spice or whatever. And I think it's so wild to me that we're like, oh, hey, what's that? You're really enjoying something. Let's absolutely mock it. Because the world, I'm just pointing to my window. The world outside is hard enough. Let people enjoy that. And yeah, not having to wait till winter for that to be the case. I'm a big fan of that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Just do it. Just life's too short and things are wild enough without depriving yourself of comforts and joys. But yeah, there we go. Here we go. So Amelia, I would never pick up a book for hate reading, but I finished some for a book club, which I would have DNF'd otherwise. Yeah, that's a critical one as well. This is partly why I love having the Booker Challenge or book clubs or whatever else. There are often books that I will pick up because of that I would never have touched. The Goldsmiths is a great example of this, where I probably would have, sometimes I've not enjoyed the book, but I've really enjoyed that it's playing and doing so much. And actually, I would never have read those had I been left to my own devices. I don't know what I would have been doing instead, but I probably wouldn't have read that. And sometimes it's really worked, sometimes it's not, but it's given me a richer feel for what books can do, and that's fun regardless. And unless it's really long and you really have to get to the end, then it's a relatively small time investment. I'm enjoying the Peter Carey conversation going on in the chat. So I've read just his Booker his Booker shortlisted ones. And I struggled with the True History of the Kelly Gang. I do feel like it's one that would work for me on a reread, because I think I just couldn't connect when I was reading it. And the more Peter Carey I've read, the more I think I appreciate his tone and the way he plays around with things. He does these wild, absurdist moves in books that I really loved in Oscar and Lucinda, and I'm really loving in Iliwaka, and I don't think I appreciated in the True History of the Kelly Gang. But yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, great comment here. So I never read the summaries for the long listed books. I just pick them up with the idea that I will like everyone. It's rare I get a book like Prophet Song or Soldier Sailor, which I loathe. Not Soldier Sailor. So I adored Soldier Sailor, but yeah, I think that's a really great method. I've done that a couple of times recently with some of the Booker ones, where I know that at some point I'll be reading a book from the long list, or from a short list rather, and I'll start reading it and be like, oh great, okay, this is fun. I didn't know this, like Iliwaka. I started reading it and I'm like, oh great, it's about 137-year-old. Fun. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, so that's been quite entertaining as well. I think that's a really good method. Sometimes I've accidentally sold myself short by reading a book's long list, or reading a little bit about what the plot is. And then when the book starts, I kind of can't focus on just living in the moment of that bit of the book, because it's just I'm too focused on I'm too focused on the thinking about how it might tie in with the plot or something. Here we go. Guilty feet. I tried to hate read Intermezzo. I failed. It's annoyingly moving and quite wonderful. Yeah, with Sally Rooney books, I try to go in fairly open if I can. And into Sally Rooney, I never quite know what to expect, but I've always been surprised. Normal people, I don't think I liked it overall. I don't think I loved it as much as some people really have gotten on with it. But Beautiful World, Where Are You, and Intermezzo, I thought were really moving and really powerful, and it made me just realize why it is so many people fall in love with her as well. So yeah, hello Jacqueline, hello. No problem at all with coming alone. Only now I'm still going to be waffling for a little bit. I hope you're doing really well. Phil, surely the real fun is in recommending a book to others that not only do you hate yourself, but are certain they will hate too. Oh, that is fun. Kieran did that to me. Kieran did, what was that book called? I was talking with Kieran about it not long ago. There was a book that Kieran absolutely hated and thought was trash, and encouraged me to. He was even posting quotes from it saying, "Look how awful this is." Then I read it, and it's the most rage I felt at a book for wasting my time ever, because it was such a navel-gazing pile of crap. It was so, like, it took itself so seriously as a book, whilst also under-delivering on absolutely everything it was trying to achieve, and being so obsessed with being seen as a big literary book that it was just dire. And that's one of those books I almost wanted to give to other people to read, to be like, can you confirm with me that this is appalling? And almost like the film The Room, where you can enjoy how trashy and awful it is in a so bad it's good kind of way. There are some books that I've definitely wanted to recommend because of that. Because I don't hate books often, but when I really hate them, I want to hear other people's reasons for hating them. But yeah, there we go. Guilty feet. Those mid-career carries like Tristan Smith, Jack Maggs, and Kelly Gang were all struggles for me, like the contemporaneous Ishiguro books, Unconsoled, and When We Were Orphans. So I really loved When We Were Orphans, but I think Ishiguro is another one where there have been some books that really hit for me, and I just think this is exquisite. Somewhere I'm not quite sure. Overall, I've really enjoyed him. But yeah, Ian McEwan is one where I love so many of his books, and they hold a really special place in my heart. There's this spread of about 4, 5, maybe 6 books of his that I just think are all exquisite. And then a couple where I just think, Ian, what are we doing here? And obviously he can write what he wants. But it is just one of those things where I think some of them, for me, just lost the fire or the edge that he had in some of those other books. And I think Ian McEwan particularly is so good at writing Ian McEwan is so great at writing books that are sets of quite unlikable characters sometimes, who are building towards a very difficult and complex plot, but it's speaking to wider things. So the Children Act, which at its heart is also a moral conversation about religion and its place in society and whatever, but also is the breakdown of a marriage and various other things, and Enduring Love, that's this erotomania thing, and all these kind of amazing things. And so I find it really tricky when you read some of his other ones, and it just feels like such an underbaked idea. It's just like, come on, you know how to do better than this. And as Mark calls it, yeah, his atonement phase. All of the books basically around atonement. I think maybe from Black Dogs to the one before Solar, because I didn't like Solar. Yeah, I think that's a really big window for me. Ros, don't worry, I couldn't remember the name of the book from hell. It's in my head somewhere. It'll hit me as we go. It was just such a self-aggrandizing piece of twaddle, let's say. Hello, Grant. Thank you in the chat there as well. Let's go to some other questions from this list. From Kerry at Bookish's Adventures in Wellbeing, who's in the chat. Is there anything you know now that you wish you'd known when you started on BookTube? Fun. I I mean, I still don't really know how to do thumbnails, but that would have been fun. I think one thing that is interesting that I didn't expect is sort of random comments that are just oddly negative or oddly scathing for no real reason. Those are wild. And occasionally I'm like, okay, great. I'm not the big arbiter of taste, as in, if I like a book and you don't, that's fine. I don't have some kind of place in the pantheon where I can make your favorite book live or die. Like, I'm not a kingmaker. And I find some of those comments really wild, where I'm like, yeah, absolutely disagree, and say, well, actually, I really loved this, or I thought this book wasn't effective in this. But some where they get really personal, that are very strange. And you're like, okay, what do you want me to do with that? I didn't like it, or I did really like it. You didn't. You had a different opinion. Great. What do we do with that? So sometimes those I find wild. I think also I wish I'd known. Maybe what did I wish I'd known? On a practical note, I wish I'd known that I could have recorded it on my film so early on, because that was easy. That's much easier than the weird system I used to have of, it's gone very dark again, of sending several files over to myself and then trying to do some stuff on my work computer, and it became a whole thing. Yeah. I suppose that something else will come to me that I probably wish I'd known. I also probably, in a positive sense, I don't think I realised I'd have this much fun with it, because I think I thought I'd just talk about the Booker and then kind of bounce, and then actually I've ended up being so sidetracked from the Booker because of all these other amazing books and things that are out there. So that's been a big win. And I don't know why this light has gone really dark again. It's just sort of, there we go. Who knows? Cool. Let's go back to the comments. So Guilty Feet. I thought Solar was a misstep for McEwan. He should not try to do funny. Yeah, it's weird, because when he goes directly for funny, like in Solar, it doesn't always work. Whereas I find some of his other books really funny, because I think he's very good at capturing the little nuances between people, even if he has a very cynical take on it. And so The Children Act, there were some really funny moments in what's otherwise a very dark book. I think Black Dogs, if I'm right, has some really funny moments. I think he's much better at kind of capturing people's thoughts and making those funny, rather than going for out and out comedy. And so, yeah. Sweet Tooth, though, I'm now trying to remember that one. I have read, I think, is that the spy one? Because that, I thought, actually, it didn't work for me for a lot of the book. And then towards the end, I suddenly saw what he was doing and thought it was a lot better than I thought. Yeah. Comment here. Yeah, felt that this year people didn't seem interested in the Booker or Women's Prize even before the long lists were announced. Seemed to be a lot of hate reading for Orbital Held and the Masood book. Yeah. I think that's very true. I think the general malaise that many people are feeling at the moment really came through in a lot of prizes this year, where people, particularly the Booker long list, I wasn't immediately enthusiastic about some of the Booker long list, because some of my favorite books of the year just were not there. It was wild, because I would see people, I think all of us, I think it feels worse when a book you wanted to be there isn't there. And it's easy to then overlook the fact that these are other books that you can enjoy and go and read. And although I didn't get on with the Claire Masood book, it's interesting when you see some people really hate read a book quite early on and just sort of start saying, like, well, this is trash and this is trash and whatever. And look, like, Claire Masood's book didn't really work for me. And I was a little, particularly because it's quite long, when you've realized that you don't like it, you feel it's a little late because you've still got quite a bit to go. But yeah, it's yeah. I love this comment. So brave for attempting to read Boris Johnson's book, would not go anywhere close to it. Yeah, I think I'm about 3 hours into the audiobook and I want to burn my phone. So that's how I'm feeling. I can very confidently say that I do not recommend it. Even if you like Boris Johnson, I don't think I'd recommend it because yes. Or the book, I very much agree. Yeah, neither the man nor the book do much for me. Yeah, I think it's an entirely dishonest book in the sense that I think he's trying to rewrite history. Yeah. I'll leave it at that. I love this comment. Yeah. So you adored Soldier Sailor. I didn't. Others adored Bee Sting. I didn't. I like the discussions. Nothing personal. Life is hard enough without looking for something to be upset about. Exactly this comment. If I could embroider this comment and have it hanging in the background of every video, I would, because that's exactly it. Like, I'm sharing opinions on books, and sometimes I might not like your favorite. Sometimes I might love a book that you hate. And I find it so wild when people actively take time out of their day to leave a comment that's just sort of like, nah. Like, by all means, if you're like, hey, look, I think the thing I really enjoyed about this book was, or actually, it seems like maybe you overlooked this thing in this book, but actually that was really important to me. Great. Love that. Very happy that you enjoyed it. Maybe it didn't work for me. Fine. I find it so weird when, yeah, I've had it a couple of times where comments have treated it as if I'm the sole reason for a book, the sole way that a book lives or dies. And I get it. Books I love a lot, I'm deeply passionate about and will defend to the hilt. But also, it's fine if you don't like them, because it's a book, it's a subjective experience. So yeah, that's the thing I think I find strangest about BookTube sometimes, is I'm never claiming to be an expert. Look, I'm some sort of jumped up gay man with a literature degree and a camera. Like, that's, you know, I'm sharing some opinions. I welcome very different opinions as well. So I always find that wild. And I get it. You want to defend your book, unless I'm being really harsh. Like, if I'm being callous towards a book that you love, I think that's different. If I'm sort of saying this is trash, this author shouldn't have tried, whatever, and it's not a critical piece of conversation about the book, I think that's fair to be a bit more miffed about it. But I think when someone is saying, hey, look, I didn't find the characters that believable, or I was a bit bored by this, fine, great, live your life. Charles, as I always say, opinions are like arseholes, you don't have to share them. Very true. Share. I won't finish what I was about to say about sharing arseholes there. Amelia, I'm a big fan of the Booker, even more so of the Booker International. I didn't hate the... Oh, has it cut off for me? I'm going to guess that says long list. But I think it's always wild when these... I think the thing to always remember as well with prize lists, and don't I know it from reading lots of the Booker shortlists, it's a group of 5 people who are metaphorically and in some ways maybe in reality locked in a room to talk about books. There are going to be so many things that don't work for you, and those 5 people will have had very different tastes. It may well be that one of the judges has championed the book that you love the most, but the other judges just didn't get on board with it, and that's fine. And that's basically how I've allowed myself to sleep since Praiseworthy wasn't long-listed. Especially as I think it's groundbreaking, but it happens, right? I think yeah, it's fine. Let's see, Amelia, yes. So yeah, yeah, I think that's a really fair point. I didn't hate the long list. I was just disappointed not to find new authors for me on the list. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I love the discovery of it. I love being able to really find new authors. And the great thing with going back over the Booker long lists and short lists of the past has been finding authors like Penelope Fitzgerald, who I had not heard of and have grown to love. And she's an author who I now really want to read lots more of. That maybe wouldn't have happened for a long time without these prizes. So I think that's really valuable in that sense. And part of that discovery is going to be that you also discover authors who you're not that fussed about and maybe won't read more of, but that's fine. Yeah, it's all great. Phil, Bob, do you think of yourself like a mild-mannered Tom Robinson of the literary world? I'm going to have to check who Tom Robinson is, because my mind is going to Tommy Robinson, who is a terrible human. And it's not him, but who's Tom Robinson? Hang on, let me just Google this in the background. Because I know it's... hang on, who is this? Am I being really dense about which Tom Robinson this is? Not like Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay, Tom Robinson. No, is that Tom Robinson? Anyway, while I'm thinking about that in the background here, let's come to this. So yeah, on a superficial note, do you get a lot of flirtatious comment or requests to join OnlyFans? I noticed male YouTubers get that a lot. Not the OnlyFans bit. Maybe I'm not doing it right. Who knows? The flirtatious comments occasionally, I've heard of, without naming names of other YouTubers who I know have received some sort of wild things, like wild requests and comments. I don't think I've had that many. I'm not sure if I should feel pleased about that or personally offended. This is not an invitation to send unsolicited stuff, but I think it's interesting because I think that kind of in the online parasocial aspect of things can mean that things are sent, yeah, I've had a couple of things where it's been this odd borderline, where people have sent things that are starting to get flirty, and I'm not quite sure. Like, I'm not sure if I'm misreading it, and they're just being nice and friendly and like, hey, let's chat, or whether it's like, hey, here's more of me, and that's a bit, yeah. So I don't know. This is not an invitation to get these, but I have heard of wilder things that some people have gotten. So I think I've had it relatively mild, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay that it's not been much. That feels good. Yeah. Alex Lopez, what's your favorite? Hello, Alex. Firstly, what's your favorite Fitzcarraldo book? And I love this because Mark has commented underneath with, my favorite Fitzcarraldo book is that one with the blue cover. Very, very good. Well done, Mark. Favorite Fitzcarraldo books. So, off the top of my head, probably. Oh God, what was the one from the International Booker list a couple of years ago? There's the Birthday Party. Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier, and I've forgotten who the translator is, but I'll try and remember later. There was also on that same long list a really amazing book about motherhood and the choice whether to have them or not by a Mexican author, and I've now entirely blanked on both her name and the book's name, but that one, I thought those are both exceptional. I think Fitzcarraldo are just brilliant at pumping out just exquisite books. Box Hill by Adam Mars Jones was a personal favourite as well. Of the white books by them, I do love a bit of Erno, and I see Erno's in the not the most loved in the chat there, but The Years I think is exceptional as well. Yes, going back over the comments, I don't understand why Praiseworthy and The Extinction of Irene Ray did not show up on reward lists. I agree, and those are two of my books of the year, I think, basically as well. So I'm gutted that they were not there as well. Oh yeah, some love in the chat for Polly Barton as well. Yep, I read. Is it the one? Is it just called Porn and Oral History? I think it's called. That was really good. I thought that was great. The Appointment, yeah, that's good. I've still not read the Netanyahus. The Books of Jacob did break me emotionally and spiritually, but I understand it's a good book. It's just not the type of book I comfortably read. As well, physically holding it was a pain. But yeah, I see why people love it. I struggle with historical fiction. I struggle with more than about 2 characters. So still, thank you, Ros. Yeah, Stillborn by Guadalupe Natal. Thank you so much. I knew somebody would be able to think of it. I'm still stuck on the Tom Robinson thing. Is Guilty Feet the 2468 motorway? Is that is because? Oh yes, it seems to be 2468. Hang on. Let me. You can watch on a live stream as I Wikipedia Tom Robinson. Oh yeah. So this is how I'm thinking. Yeah, Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay. So I met him at a thing. because he did an event for a charity, the charity I work for, and sang Glad to Be Gay, singing for Glad to Be Gay. And he was just such a hero and really funny and really great. And I just good man all round, it seems. Yeah. Fab. Cool. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, 50 Sounds by Polly Barton is getting some love in the chat from Phil. That's great. Sorry, I love this story. Hilariously, I almost recommended her own book to her when I happened to bump into her at a bookshop and heard she was a Japanese translator. Love that. That is fantastic. Oh, Guilty Feet. Are you aware of the Tournament of Books? They just released a 70-book long list of best fiction for their competition in March. It's awesome. Oh, I've not heard of this. This is fun. So I'm guessing just like a sort of like a league, not league table, but like a competition of one versus one with several books. That's fun because I think as much as books don't always work as competition with each other, there is something fun about seeing the median book, like the one that most people, that's not the right use of median, but the book that loads of people have enjoyed, even if it's not their top favorite book of the year, but where it kind of settles in enough people love this book that this is kind of the one that they would often choose. That seems really fun. Let's go into some more of these questions. My question for the Q&A, if you were to be, this is from Tina's 1640. If you were to be stranded on an island alone for a long time, what would be the 3 books that you would bring with you? What are the top 3 books that you reread? Let's do the reread one first. I'm terrible for rereading books. It happens so rarely. And I often do love it when I do. Books where I've really gained a new perspective on the book from rereading were Atonement by Ian McEwan, to bring that back up again, because I read it. It had such a nostalgic place for me because I read the book when I was probably not long after it came out. Actually, I think I was a teenager or like in my early 20s. Read it, loved it, thought it was incredible, and was surprised that books could do this. Then I reread it, I think last year, as part of the Booker Project, just to refresh my memory of it, and just thought, yeah, this is even better than I remember it being. I had the same for what else was it? I think it was another Booker one. I think On Beauty by Zadie Smith. I reread and thought, actually, this is great. I do remember this being good, but this is great. Same for The Gathering, actually, by Anne Enright. The book that I've probably reread the most, and that's because I have a sort of specific place in my heart for it, and it's probably it's the inspiration for if I ever got a tattoo, I'd get something from this. So Michael Ender's book Momo, which is aimed at teenagers, I think, more. It's a really magical, beautiful story about slowing down and taking time to appreciate stories and all that kind of jazz. And I really loved it in English, and I've sort of since used it as the book that when I'm learning a new language that I eventually try to read that book in that language, because I know the plot enough and it's sort of open enough, and because it's for a younger audience, it's simple enough that I can use it, but while still being a stretch. So I've read Momo in English, and then I've reread it, I think, in both French and in German, which sounds like a flex to show off. There's a lot I did not understand. I will say that now. There's a lot where I did not understand what was going on, but I knew the book well enough that it got me through. So probably Momo. That's a book that I would love, and actually a book I would take with me on a remote island, because I think it's so full of wonder that I would enjoy being able to go back to it. I'd probably want a longer book because I'd have time to really go into it. I wonder if something like Praiseworthy, or maybe, although I've not read it yet, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, I feel like I'd maybe take with me, just be able to give it proper time. Also another book that would keep giving me joy. I think maybe Life of Pi, because I reread it and loved it just as much, if not more. But also that book is about being somewhat trapped on a remote island, or in a remote situation rather, on a boat. And I think something about that magic would feel really special for rereading that book. Or maybe completely heartbreaking because I'm just reading about the exact same pain I'd be feeling on this remote island. Maybe it's a really great remote island, who knows? But there we go. Let's do some more from previously submitted. Janice has asked, my only question is, how do you manage to not only read as many books, but how are you retaining storylines and characters? All the best for many years to come. Thank you. So the thing is, so in terms of how I read so much, it's sometimes a mystery to me. I'm a relatively fast reader. I also have quite a lot of time where I'm commuting, and I really love a good commute. I think I'm a bit too overstimulated in my day-to-day life, to the extent where I'm actually starting to explore whether there's a sort of a thing behind it, like ADHD or something, because I am so on throughout a lot of the day. And so actually for me, long periods of commuting, I'm so happy about a 4-hour train journey. Sometimes if the train gets delayed, I'm delighted, because it means I have a little bit more time to just really be in my zone, unless I've got something I have to do. And so sometimes that's where I am in my reading, where I just want to have a really long read on a train. I do a lot of audiobooks, and that really helps, because I'm often walking around or moving or doing something and kind of wanting to be in my own little zone with an audiobook, or I'm commuting on a long train and also want everyone to leave me alone and also read. So that's it. In terms of retaining storylines and characters, I am appalling at maintaining particularly characters. I often remember, like, oh yeah, there was that man, and then he did that thing, and there's that other thing, and someone's like, you mean Phil, the main character of this book? And I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. So there's that, where I'm terrible at that. Storylines I'm better at, but still pretty terrible. So I don't retain them that well. There are some books where I forget them significantly soon after. And this is again where I will say what I was saying about Eric being such a sensitive and focused reader, because I will have conversations with Eric and he'll remember a character and a plot line from a book 4 years ago. And he'll talk in loving detail about the way the book structures that. And it's so beautiful to just watch him like bloom with excitement about it. And I sort of wish I had that, because I forget that from, apart from a handful of books really, where I remember that quite well. But yeah, there we go. Michael Ender, yes. Yeah, I'm glad, Amelia, that you love him too. I've not read his short stories for adults. I've not read anything apart from Momo, actually. So Momo has this really special place in my heart. I've never touched anything else by Michael Ender. I'm going to add this to the list for 2025 of non-Booker reading that I get to do. Okay. Hello, Callum, in the comments. Hiya. Apologies if you've answered this before, but do you get Booker fatigue, and does this cloud your reading for pleasure outside the long lists? To some degree, yes. I think the thing I'm finding, and particularly for looking at 2025's reading, is I've had a lot of prescribed reading this year. I try to avoid it. And my tag video that I did right at the beginning of 2024 about reading plans was all saying, yeah, I'm going to be a bit kinder to myself. I'm going to, give myself a bit more freedom to venture away. And then now I'm in a stage where I'm like, no, Bob, you're a few books, not far away from finishing the Booker project. Go do it. Sometimes it does take away pleasure. And actually, there have been holidays where I've basically purposely given myself no prize list books, partly because I don't think my brain would react to them well when I'm trying to relax. But where, here you go, Bob, here are some interesting books that you think will be fun, that you don't have to have an opinion on in any way. Go and do that. And I've loved that, and it's felt really liberating. So I do want to get back to that in 2025. I think that will be the dream for me, to get back a little bit to remembering, because a lot of the Booker Prize books I read before I started my Booker project are still some of my favorites. And so sometimes that makes me wonder if the reason, Atonement is great anyway, but is the reason that I love Atonement so much because I read it when I was younger, and so there's more nostalgia, but also I read it with no constraints. I didn't have to have an opinion. I just got to sit and engage with the book. Whereas now I might be reading a book thinking, okay, right, cool, got to get to the end of this because you've got more to read. And actually that's not fair on the book or the author to do that quite a lot of the time, and on myself really. So some fatigue. I've been trying to keep a clear mind as much as possible on that, to kind of say, great, I'm just going to just really peace out a bit from this and say, whether I have an opinion. And actually, the nice thing with the book of shortlists has sometimes been, I'm reading this book now, I might only need to have an opinion on it in 2 months' time when I finish the rest of the list and do the video. So actually, for now, I'm just going to sit and read this and treat it like a brand new book. And sometimes that's really worked, and so I need to get back on that. But yeah, for reading outside of pleasure, for reading for pleasure outside of the lists, actually sometimes it's meant I've enjoyed them more because I don't have to think about much with them. I just get to sit, and this is the fun, exciting book that's not on the book list. And then it ends up on the women's prize list, and I'm like, oh, for God's sake. But there we go. Sorry, there's something about looking down at the screen that makes me quite snotty. Mark, yeah, maybe your award focus next year should be the Deutsche Buchpreis, the German book prize. I would actually love to. My German is not at a level where I can read complicated texts like that and engage with the literariness of them. Unfortunately, I would love to. I need to get my German up to a level where I can do that, because I'd really love to be able to read, yeah, a German book prize book before it's been translated into English, and then read the English translation and sort of see where things are different. I wanted to do that with Jenny Erpenbeck. I've got the German version of, this is now where I entirely forget the book's name in English as well as in German. One of the ones, not Go Went Gone, not that one. The other, another one that she was fairly, it involves like a tree and a garden and various planters. It will come to me. But that one by Jenny Eppenbeck, that is almost impossible to guess from what I've just said. I want to read that in German, and I've got a copy somewhere on my desk that I will read, but I need to kind of maybe get my German up to a level where I can engage with the literary quality a bit better, and not just struggle for 150 pages, which is otherwise very likely to be the case. Let's go to a few more of the comments. Let's see what other people say. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I love this from Vigilant Corpse. What makes a book worthy of 5 stars for you, and what type of book do you essentially tend to give 5 stars? This is a great question in many ways. So the whole where people put their stars, I'm probably more generous than others. 4 is like, so for me, a 4 is kind of, I enjoyed this, and even if I have some issues with it, I didn't fully love it, I think this is a fairly solid book. And I know for some people 4 is like, it has to be very good, and they would give the sort of solid book a 3. And I get that. Some I'll give a 3 if there's enough that I didn't connect with or didn't like, or I think it's a bit underbaked. So for me, 5 is often where I've just sort of fallen in love with the story. I've completely been swept up by it. I think that it meets its goals as a book. Jen in the comments there, if Bob hates a book, he gives it 4 stars. Not completely true, but there have been books that I've been like, okay, it was fine, and given it 4, and actually that's probably just because you can't give half stars. That would have been a really good 3.5 in a sort of a more nuanced system, like on the other book one that I've now entirely forgot, Storygraph. So yeah, what makes it a 5? If I've really fallen in love with the story and kind of been swept away by it, if I think that it achieves its goals as a book, and I know that sounds quite nebulous, but I mean, some books, for example, this is an essay that wants to explore these themes and whatever. And in some ways, nonfiction is easier to maybe hit that. But if it does that well enough, it feels well researched, I've really enjoyed the ride, then that might be a sort of 5-star. I'd still, it might hover somewhere else. 5 is typically where I'm like, it's not a kind of perfect no notes kind of situation, but enough where I think this is a really solid book. It's so well done. It's fresh. It's bold. It's well constructed. I feel like it's pushed something forward. It's either formally very inventive, or it's really developed an idea or thought well. Let's think of a recent 5-star. Actually, for example, Nathan Evans with One Last Song. I really loved it. I think it's just a really fun book. I think it's a really, really fun book. So funny and clever and thoughtful, and a story that completely melted my heart, made me almost cry. And yeah, like maybe putting it next to, I don't know, Margaret Atwood, you might sort of say, well, actually, this is a more standard narrative in One Last Song or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily agree, but I could see how someone could make that argument. But for me, One Last Song was still so successful at what it did. It had such a unique and bold voice and was just a lot of fun and had a lot of heart. I'm like, yeah, have 5 stars. That's exactly where that would go. But even then, you know, it might be something super different to that, like a really experimental book. And I think it's just so bold and fun and inventive that I've just really enjoyed it. And so I'd give it 5 for that. And I love this. But in YouTube, video gives 4.5 from me. I think this is mocking my my overgenerous nature. It has been funny actually sometimes where I've looked back and realized that in a video I've just been like, great, bold, amazing. And then I look at the Goodreads, I'm like, I gave it a 4, and I'm like, it doesn't sound like I'd give it a 4, does it, from there? But yeah, there's sort of shades of variation with it. But yeah, it's fair. I'm probably overly generous. My Goodreads, I don't necessarily take too seriously in that respect. Sometimes I'm like, fine, 4 stars, whatever. Have 4 stars. You know, it's no skin off my back. But it's, for me, the nuance of talking about the book is more where that comes out. I think if I just did Goodreads, if I didn't have a YouTube channel, I'd probably be a little bit more what's the word, discerning on Goodreads, or would write reviews where I'd clear up that nuance. But yeah, that's fine. Callum, I love this as well. Thank you for the questions. These are great. 2 more questions I thought of. Is there one author you just cannot click with? And do you think BookTube or book social media has an obsessive consumerism problem? Love these. Yeah. So on the author I cannot click with, I've only read 2 of his, and one of them I did give a 4-star to, given everything we're just saying. But Will Self is someone I struggle with. And part of the reason I held off reading all the long lists as well for a while, or reading all the Goldsmith shortlists, was because Will Self is someone I'll have to contend with. I can't. What's the name of the book he got shortlisted with? For the one that's about, I think it's about dementia and memory loss and language loss. And I get what he's doing with it. I just didn't find it successful. I get why people love it. I get how people get into it. And I know that it's successful in its own way. For me, it felt like the stylized form of it massively got in the way of the point it was trying to make. And I get the point and the style were intricately connected. But for me, it felt so kind of patronizing, because I felt like Will Self just wanted to prove that he was clever. Oh my gosh, thank you, Amelia. Visitation. Thank you. That, I can't believe it took me. Oh, glad you managed to extract that from my utter nonsense. Yeah, so Will Self is someone I've really struggled with. I thought the short story collection I read of his, I thought was much better, partly because there were some short stories I hated, but some short stories I thought were really good. And so that balanced it out for me. Whereas I think a novel form of any of those short stories wouldn't have worked for me. Sheila Heti is an author I've struggled with. Sheila Heti is one I don't know. I find her really tricky because I really enjoyed Alphabetical Diaries. But in some ways that was more just the kind of idea of it I thought was fun and clever. I think Sheila Heti, I find her writing really introspective and navel-gazy in a way that feels I don't know how to say this without sounding like an absolute douche about her. I think I find her really it's like I think for me a lot of it I'm like, could you have just brought this up in therapy? Like, did this need to be a book? Because actually this feels like you're working through something, and actually the novel or the thing could have been the working through. And then you go back and you edit and you tighten it up to be the thing that you wanted it to be all along, rather than I'm sat here thinking, I'm just sort of reading your inner thoughts in a way that can be really liberating, but also feels like you just want me to tell you that you're okay. Anyway, yeah. Amelia reads, I think, yeah, the problem with Will Self is that he's just too full of himself. I agree. I think, you know, he loves using big long words, and it's great. In some ways, people like him keep those long words alive, and there's such a beauty and richness in them. But Ali Smith plays with those long words and does something with them. Will Self uses the long words, and I think is just like, well, I use the long word. What about you? You know, that's how I feel about it. Maybe I'm entirely wrong. Maybe there'll be a book of his that I'll read and I'll love. It's not happened yet, but there you go. Yes, Ihr Visitation being Heimsuchen. Yeah, thank you. And Callum's other question, yes, do you think BookTube or book social media has an obsessive consumerism problem? Yeah, I think that does exist, definitely. I think things about the algorithm do drive, and obviously if something does well algorithmically, that's also because people are watching it, so people are engaged with it. I think generally a lot of places like YouTube or various other social media are drawn towards selling something. And the thing I find tricky with books is I think the product of the physical thing of a book, apart from the fact that you can get it in a library or in other forms that are free or cheap, as well as that being a labor of love and a physical object, I think the ideas are the things that work and explore with it, right? Something like a makeup brush, it has a specific use that you're doing and you can do something creative with it and you can do whatever. But at the end of the day, it is a product that needs to be sold. You don't borrow a brush from the library and then give it back, right? Or listen, you know, I think the thing with a book is that often I think the ideas are the most exciting part. The visuals of it can be great, but you don't need to buy that to be able to engage with that, or you can buy it and give it to someone, right, or whatever. And so I think sometimes the consumerism problem of someone who's just like, look at, you know, tour of my 4,000 books and whatever. I get why you'd want to watch that. It's kind of fun sometimes. But part of me also thinks that there's a thing where where books become a consumable object rather than a place where you can get those ideas. That's a really vague and woolly way of saying it, but if that makes sense, I think, and that's why I find it really tricky when YouTubers, non-book ones I'm talking about, are constantly selling, you know, Raid Shadow Legends or whatever. I'm like, I get why you're doing it. I get that you need to be able to have money to make these videos and have a living from this. But I don't like it being tied up with consumerism, because for me, particularly when books become a thing where it's just like, here's the easiest way to buy 400 books. You're like, okay, great. Are you ever going to read them? Are you going to engage with them? Because the thing, like, I'm sure the author's happy that you've bought loads of their books, but there's more to them. You could find an old book in a garage, and my dad is clearing out some of his stuff at the moment, and we found loads of these beautiful old versions of books. And he said, you know, do you want them? Well, yeah. Maybe I'll read them. Maybe I won't with some of them. But I like the idea that, you know, I'm going to engage with them. And I've been sort of doing the Marie Kondo thing to some degree of clearing out old books. And I have had to be quite reasonable with, you know, quite brutal with myself at times of, you know, I love this book. Am I ever going to reread it? Maybe not. Is it special in any way? Like, is it a signed one? In which case I'll probably keep it. I'm debating this at the moment with, I don't know if you can see these here, my selection of Tilted Axis books. I've not read all of them. I've read probably, of the 30 or so that are there, I've probably read about 10. The difficult thing how they got me is because they're in numerical order. And I'm torn between, do I give them and sell them away before I complete the collection of them? Or do I carry on collecting them just to have 1 to 50 or whatever and feel special? And actually, I don't need them. But I would like to read them and then give them a new home. And so I'm trying to resist the idea of having to read all of them just because they're there. Yeah, I think Roz, you've hit the nail on the head there. I love seeing people's reading plans, but book hauls leave me cold. Yeah, I think when the whole video is like, I love seeing people's excitement of like, oh my God, I bought this book. I'm so excited to read it. Great. Love that. And I'm not here to police people's content, but I think I find it really tricky when someone's like, here are 400 books. And then like a year goes past and they have not read a single one of them. And you're like, okay, so are these just really pretty ornaments for your room? In which case, fine if they are, but I get a bit weirded out when it's like a huge book haul and the whole video is just look how much money I spent. That's weird to me, and I can't really get my head around that. Yeah, anyway, some more comments in the chat here about Will Self, the Will Self guide to self-deprecation. Very, very good. It's almost impossible to watch Will Self talking in his YouTube videos, but many, many years ago, I met him at a reading event in Hamburg and he was quite nice. I can imagine that. I actually do think he's probably quite a nice guy. I'm probably hating on him for no reason, but yeah, I find him a bit much. And yeah, I think the comment just there, CM Levy, there are booktubers who are not convinced to actually read books, but I'm cynical about most things. Yeah, I mean, without naming names, I think there have been some people I've watched and I'm like, or, you know, 5 videos in a row are just about a book in some way. And I'm like, how much at this stage is this product placement of hitting a contract of, you know, I've given you a free book and you need to mention it, and therefore it's turned up in 5 videos, versus am I ever going to read this? And this is also why I've not gone out to that many publishers to say, hey, can you send me free stuff? Because unless I'm really keen on reading it, you know, I'm currently overly busy with lots of other reading anyway, so am I going to do it? Who knows? Yeah, so I find that kind of tricky. And I will say that's a minuscule proportion, I think, of booktubers, but I think it's always really noticeable when there is a kind of books are like a physical object that makes me look clever and is a personality trait more than I've enjoyed the book and I want to talk to you about it. And I think that's the real joy in booktube. And people like Roz, I think, is a great example of this. I just love watching people like Roz get very excited about a book they've read. Beautiful. That's a wonderful moment, and that is what booktube is here for. I think, to share that joy, and even if, you know, you don't like a book, to be able to talk a bit about why it didn't work for you and share that opinion. So there we go. Cool. More questions from the chat. I'm going a lot longer than I thought this would be. Apologies, this is very long, everybody. Oh, actually, sorry, I think there was another question in that last bit that the BookTube prize, that was it. Sorry, Amelia. Yes, I did. I read for the BookTube prize the last couple of years. I was quite quiet about it on the channel because there is a thing where they sort of say, you know, don't talk about the book too publicly, just so you don't influence other readers of the book prize. Yeah, and some of those I found really interesting. I always forget to do a big wrap up at the end of the BookTube prize, but I've read some interesting ones through that. I'm also often quite lucky because I sometimes have been given the allocation where I've read most of them already, and I'm like, thank you. Amelia, yes, I love this. I love book hauls, not the ones where people are showing 100 books, but I'm interested in what books the channels I'm following are interested in. And if they're like me, it might take ages before they read them. Yeah, exactly. So that, I think, can be quite fun. And so a good example of this, I think, is Ben. Ben Reads Good. So Ben, after the last BookTuber gathering, had a video of, I can't remember how many it was, like 10, 15 books. Ben's going to read them at some point, but Ben also gave a loving introduction to all of them of, this is why this book is really interesting, or here's the context for it, or I'm really intrigued to read this, and this is part of my reading plans. Great, love it. I think that's exactly like a brilliant use of a book haul, of look at all this fun, exciting new thing, like fun and shiny new, but also here are some, I will read these. It might take a while, but in the meantime, here's some things that are on the potential TBR coming up. And he had a story behind them, right? Of like, this is a book Charlie gave me, or Bob and Roz were kind of standing near me, pressuring me to buy this book in a charity shop. You know, things like that, where like there's a story behind it. And I think that's more fun and interesting. Anywho, let's go to some other books. So yeah, from Cynthia, my question: have you ever done voice work? I think you'd be a good audiobook, movie, commercial narrator. I love this. It's very kind, thank you. I've always thought if I do, because I do write, so if any of my work ever got published, I would want to do the audiobook. Although I've written myself into a corner because I've written a character who's Australian and I cannot do an Aussie accent for the life of me. So I might have to get someone else in, or give a caveat at the beginning of the audiobook that all attempts at Aussie accents, you know, the character isn't Australian but will be voiced in a British accent because I can't do it. So there's that. I would love to do audiobook work. I think Willow did some recently, and I'm so proud of her. I think Ben as well. Ben, Lonesome Reader, Ben, also did. And I think, yeah, both amazing people. I think are bringing out the character and life of a book. A friend of mine is releasing a video game that's like a visual novel, and we all got round his house one day to basically play or read the game. And it was fun because at one point I was given a narrator role to just read through, and I just loved reading them out. Whether I would actually be able to do it properly, I don't know. If someone wants to pay me for it, please, I will happily do this. I cannot guarantee that I'd be a good reader of them. I'm enthusiastic. That's my one skill set. So there we go. But I would love to do that. It's very kind that people have mentioned it. Here we go. A really fun one that Jennifer Loves Books and I have spoken about in person. Top 3 Kylie songs. So very, very good question. So 2 of my favorites that have to be here: Slow and Confide in Me. The third one is always the variable one. Confide in Me and Slow are both such interesting Kylie songs. I think they're both beautiful, and they have, I don't know, I just really enjoy them. I would say the third, Padam Padam, feels so basic. It's such a good choice, but it's so overdone. But it would be up there. If not, it'd be Please Stay. I think it's just really fun. I think Kylie's just great. She's got such a good back catalogue. Yeah, there we go. The Kylie question, the important Kylie question. There we go. And a question from Talia. Question. Looking back on your reading experiences and those books that evoked a deeper emotional or just more lasting impression on you, do you see any common themes, subject matter, or elements of writing style, etc., that you feel are the reasons these books stand out for you? Yeah, I love this. This, I think, is such a beautiful question, because kind of like the 5-star question of why I give 5 stars to things. When I look back, the books that have had the most profound effect on me, to some degree, have also spoken to me on a personal level, right? So myself as a gay man, there are books that are about the queer experience that will naturally hit home harder than others, than other books might. And I think you see that so lovingly in some books. So I think Sean Hewitt's, oh my God, how am I forgetting him? All Down Darkness Wide hit me so hard, because I just thought it was such a beautiful rendition of love and tragedy and care and so many other things. I think it's such a beautiful, beautiful book. And that really hit me harder than most other books I've read for a good few years. And I think where I felt that connection was just the vulnerability, I think, of it. And that's often the thing that I've connected with most about so many books, is where I feel there's a real vulnerability at the heart of it that tries to get to the human experience. So All Down Darkness Wide was a particularly beautiful example of that. I think Colm Tobin's The Blackwater Lightship had such a beautiful portrayal of family and coming out and love and so many other things. Andrew Macmillan, I'm basically going to mention a lot of gay men here for a while. Andrew Macmillan's poetry collection Physical, as well as, well, all of his poetry actually. I can't remember if it's in Physical. It's a book called Blood, and it just kind of got me. It really struck through to the heart of me. Because it's a poem all about something relatively benign in going for a sexual health test, but Andrew Macmillan draws a line between that and a kind of legacy of thousands of men, or millions, really, millions of people in general, dying from or having complications due to HIV/AIDS, and the kind of fear and shame that embeds itself for a lot of queer people as a result. And those books really hit, that poem especially, but his poetry really hit me hard in a way that I just thought was so profound. I think a lot of books as well that have this kind of playful, childlike innocence to them really hit me in a few ways. Probably also why I like Momo so much. But I think books that really talk about that experience of being a sensitive young child really resonate with me, Kilsa Breeze. And that's, I think, where some of the most beautiful writing I've seen has been for me, where it struck me so personally. Other books I've been connected to on a different level, and you know, could maybe sometimes more on an academic level, or things like that. But I think that's where I found it really special. Ali Smith's writing has always really hit me. And I think a big part of that is because she writes children and young people so well. And there's something about the way she writes, that sensitivity and lack of surety about being a child, that really struck with how I felt as a kid. So yeah, I think that's a really deep answer maybe to that question, but that's where I felt the most hit hard and most connected to a book. I think on a more academic level, it's where the form is so interesting that it kind of merges with the rhythms in my head. And I'm a kind of rhythm reader and writer in some ways. I write to a sort of rhythm. I love books that pull you into their orbit and speak to you in a very specific style and orbit and rhythm rather. So Milkman by Anna Burns, I think, has such a strong voice. And eventually my brain, like with Duck's New Report, my brain just latched onto that rhythm, and all of my thoughts were in that rhythm. I once watched, on a side point, I once watched 5 hours straight of Daria, the animated cartoon show. And because I spent 5 hours listening to Daria, my brain moved to her rhythms. So all I could do was think sarcastically for the next day. So somebody would ask me something like, well, yeah, great. And I'm like, Bob, this is not you, but I was in Daria mode. And great books, I think, often connect with that rhythm for me in my head. And I live in that rhythm for the space of the book. And those are some of the most mind-blowing reading experiences I've ever had, because it feels like for a moment I'm just communing directly with the author, and the page is just this medium that is just kind of almost in the way. And it's not to make it sound sort of semi-religious, but it's a wild thing when it happens, and it really blows my mind. Amelia's question here. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm glad that you like the Kylie picks. I think I need to listen to her new album as well, Kylie's new album. There are probably some great new ones on there. I'm trying to think there's some other, probably some other Kylie songs I'll remember after this. Amelia's question, most important question ever is when you come back to Berlin again. I don't currently have any plans, but a good friend of mine moved to Berlin. So actually several friends of mine have moved to Berlin. So I have multiple reasons to have to go. And I try to go somewhere German speaking at least once a year to vaguely keep my German in touch. So probably next year, some point. Who knows? Yeah, there we go. Anna in the comments there. Hello. There's a non-profit called LibriVox. Oh, I didn't know about this. With volunteers recording free audiobooks for public domain books, making audiobooks more accessible. Oh, this is wonderful. It's a good place to start narrating as a passion project, I think. Oh, I would love this. I might just do this. I might find a book that nobody else has been doing the audio for, that is maybe a book I love. Ideally a short one, because I think my voice for a long period of time is probably quite grating. That'd be really fun. I'd really like to do that. Yeah, thank you. I might give that a little go, LibriVox. That would be really fun, because I'd like to try it out, especially as I've been thinking about things like sort of a podcast or whatever. And whether I'll ever do that, who knows? Time is short. Next year's going to be such a busy year that I'm already sort of in many parts of my life that I'm already quite nervous. So maybe it's not the time to add a new project in, but we'll see. Ben Reesgood has a lovely question. Is the Booker still your favourite prize? And if not, would you be changing your channel name? I think, well, even once I'm quote unquote finished with the Booker project of the shortlists, I do want to go back and read some of the long lists, not all of them, because before I think 2007, 2008, the long lists were like 20 books, kind of like the women's prizes now. And not being funny, I'm not doing that. I would do post 2007 or 2008, whenever it changed. But yeah, even then, even if I just became exclusively the Goldsmith Prize or whatever, I can't see myself changing my channel name now. Partly because I once mentioned being bored of my name, and multiple people commented, be like, "No, you cannot change this." And but I see why. It's kind of, somebody pointed out, it's like Pink Floyd, where actually the more you think about the name, the less it makes sense. But you've kind of just accepted it as being a name for that band. And equally, I think Bob the Booker at this point is just what it is. Maybe I'll change it, but I don't know. Even without the Booker, I think it still stands, hopefully. Let's see what other questions there are. Here we go. Yes, Anthony. Oh, and very kind of Anthony to talk about indie presses. I do love a good indie press. How do you ensure reading shortlists, long lists, etc., in a tight time frame doesn't have a negative impact on your reading of the books? Yeah, and sort of he mentions about struggling with the pace of trying to squeeze in too many. And yeah, this is exactly how I think I touched on it briefly earlier, but sometimes that is a challenge. I normally have to give myself some breaks. So if I'm going to read, Jennifer, Bob comparing himself to Pink Floyd is not what I was expecting. Yeah, unfortunately, I've not quite got that iconic album yet, but you know, give myself some time. And exactly, Phil, that's how I like to think about it. The booker is one who books, but just with an extra ER. Part of the idea with it, I'll come back to Anthony's question in a second. Part of the idea when I set up the channel and had the name was I was obsessed with the word fruiterer. So I was really confused at why the person who sells fruit isn't a fruiter, but is a fruiterer. And so I was like, this would be really funny to do with booker, because also booker, but also what the hell is a booker? You know, I thought it might work past Booker Prize, so I will keep it for that reason. But it is silly. I do contend. But yeah, Anthony, his question about reading, not kind of burning out, you know, with like the Booker, because I tend to, when the Booker Prize comes out each year, the long list, I try to read the long list quite a lot, you know, as quickly as I can, because I want to be able to review all the books. And I want to be able to do a shortlist video before the shortlist has come out, before the shortlist is confirmed, so I know I can make my predictions and I can talk about the shortlist. It has its drawbacks, which is that actually, like with this year, I forgot that we hadn't had a winner yet, and I would go into a bookshop and be like, why are there all these signs about the shortlist? And then realize, yeah, Bob, we're in October. The shortlist, the winner hasn't been chosen. You've still got a month. And actually, it did take some of the joy out for me. And I think the thing to be careful of with it is just to give yourself breaks for them, to really take those books as they are. I like reading them close together to get a sense of how they come together. But the thing that I found really tricky with that is, yeah, you do have to be able to separate them. I normally will try to shove something in the middle that's entirely not that. So either a book I'm reading for a book club that's in a significantly different time period, or a non-fiction book, something to break it up so that I feel like I have a little bit more freshness. I'd love to be a book prize judge in a real way, you know, like for an actual, you know, a big book prize, or even a small one. Hit me up. I'm happy to do this. I think the struggle would be if it's something like the Booker, where you've got 150, 160 books, you can't really have breaks in between them without falling massively behind. And to some degree, you have to take those books in collaboration with each other. I think the only way to do it is to have a real mental break before you do it, like changing landscape in some capacity. So I've read all these other books, and we're now going to have this one book that I take with me onto a train, a long train journey, and do it that way. I think it has to be that way, and that's what I've tried to do with them. If I can't space them out with other things, or maybe have one on audio and one physical or something. It's difficult. I normally have a different audiobook on the go if I can, and read the book of books physically. Charlie Brooke says, my question is, what are 5 highlights from your BookTube journey from the last 5 years? So without sounding really cliched, the first one has to be a lot of the people I've met along the way. I also, particularly from that, my friendship with Eric, Carl Anderson. I've realized I've mentioned him several times in this video, like sort of biggest fanboy of like, love you, Eric. He is wonderful, one of my favorite humans. And it's wild to think, actually, there are a lot of these people who, before I even watched BookTube or whatever, these people did not exist in a way kind of in my life. And then I've seen them online, and I've been able to hang out with them in real life. Like almost all the people who are at the BookTube gatherings, so like many of whom are in this chat. So Roz and Jen, Kieran, Ben, the other Ben from Doom Antidote, who I've met a couple of times as well. Yeah, loads of people who I've been able to meet from that. So that's one definite highlight. Particularly at one point, watching Kieran, who's already an incredibly energetic man, down 2 very strong coffees in Cardiff, and like watching as his eyes started like twitching, and realizing we're in for a wild ride. So that's probably one. I think 2, obviously, as I'm on a 5,000 subscriber live stream, is like the lovely conversations I'm able to have with people often all across the world, about books. It still feels weirdly self-indulgent that I just sort of show up and talk and, then, and things like that. So, but that's been really fun for me. And I think it's so lovely that there are so many book people across the world, and particularly because reading is obviously often such an individual pursuit. And then to be able to connect with people who are like, hey, have you read this thing? Or I also really love this thing, or this book made me think of this other thing, is so special. I think that's a really special thing. A third highlight would be a lot of the conversations I've had with publishers themselves. It's been really eye-opening to get a sort of sneak peek into, or sort of peek behind the curtains into some things in publishing. And a lot of that I wouldn't necessarily have had without my channel unless I was working in publishing. But to have these conversations, you know, you see how far in advance publishers start working on certain books, where I've had advanced copies for things almost a year in advance, and I had to sort of sit on that book and be like, yeah, it's not out yet. It won't be for a while. It's very good. So things like that. And that's been really fascinating. Yeah, I think it's also a highlight for me. Maybe the fourth highlight is, I think to some degree it's changed some parts of how I read. Sometimes it's made me a better reader because I know that a book that otherwise I might have just sort of flicked through and put to one side, I have to engage with it a little bit more because I'm going to have to be talking about it, particularly if it's a shortlisted book or something. So I think it's changed my reading in that sense. Sometimes for the worse, because sometimes I feel like, you know, the tail is wagging the dog instead of the other way around. But mostly for the better. And finally, what's another good one? I mean, actually, not in a kind of like I met celebrities kind of way, but I've been able to meet a few authors through things. And in fairness, these are authors I could have met just going to book events. I didn't need to be a booktuber to go to them, but it's deepened how I've been able to do that. So interviewing Neil Bartlett, for example, has to be like a personal highlight for me across my. I'm getting oddly emotional thinking about this. I love him. Neil Bartlett, reading Address Book was such an emotional experience for me, and it was such a heartfelt book. Actually, yeah, to the question earlier, Address Book definitely up there. The way he writes about queer history, I thought was so beautiful. In Queer Lives, he just does it like nobody else. And interviewing Neil Bartlett, firstly, was a joy because that man, you sort of give him half a question and he says this whole incredible thing that you just want to bottle up and keep forever. And then on top of that, Neil Bartlett, I met him in person, and then I've met him now a couple of times in various events, normally through Incandescent, who were his publisher for that book, and for the Disappearance Boy. And the first time I met him, I've told this story a couple of times on the channel, I think. The first time I met him, we'd spoken to each other online, but we'd not met in person. And he sees me across the room and thinks he recognizes me and can't quite work out why. I go up to him and I'm like, "Hi, Neil, it's Bob. We spoke online." And he just sort of, this man, this sort of towering legend of queer writing, just says, "Oh, I looked across the room earlier and thought, I recognize that old queen. Who is she?" I'm like, I have just been called that old queen by a queer author who I admire, who's in his 60s. I'm dying happy. This is the best moment of my life. There's no way up from here. This is the best it's ever going to be, and that's probably my favorite moment. Yeah. I mean, all the other things have been great as well. Don't get me wrong. The Neil Bartlett thing had like a personal resonance with me of being able to engage with him and then read his book and talk with him and be able to talk. And like the interview with Sam Kenyon, with Justin David, was just so fun. With Nathan Evans, I've been so lucky to be able to talk to various authors and about their work. Sam Kenyon was also such a delight. I had so much fun talking to him. I loved his book, and it was so beautiful to talk to him. Such a warm and open soul as well. Super. Hi, Atana. Heya. Glad. Always really nice to see people joining as well. Don't worry about coming in sort of later or whatever. You can rewatch afterwards. I realise I'm coming up for 2 hours. I've been talking for a very long time. I'm very sorry. Let's go through the last questions from people as well. Sonia, my bookie question is, do you reread? Very rarely, not enough. And have you ever been disappointed rereading a previous favourite? Oh, I got close to this at one point. There are some books I'm scared to reread because part of me is nervous that I will find faults in them that I didn't see the first time. And sometimes that's healthy. Thank you so much, Atana. That's very kind. Sometimes, yeah, it's healthy to be able to go back to a book and... So I'm just looking for a tissue because I realize I'm very snotty. I've got a little tissue around me. Give me one moment. I will find one while I'm just flapping around in the background here. Yeah, so sometimes, yeah, I think rereading some books has been a disappointment. Very rarely. Normally it's been for the better. I had a brief touch and go moment when I reread The Accidental by Ali Smith, because halfway through I was just like, oh, I remember loving this book so much. Why am I not loving it right now? Then the book carried on and I fell and I realized exactly why I loved it. And that was really lovely. I think books that I read when I was a teenager, that's where it's a bit dicier, because I think there are some things where you're like, yeah, as a teenager, and you love it, and it's really grisly and messy and whatever. And then you reread it as an adult, and you're like, this writer has no idea what is going on. I just loved this because it was, you know, awkward and whatever, and I was a teenager. That normally happens more with music, where I listen back to an album. Like, nostalgia is a wonderful drug, because there are some albums I've listened to that I loved when I was a teenager. I'm like, what was I doing? Yeah. Callum, I love your question here. Is there a quote from a book that always stays in your head? Give me a moment while I have a little think about this, because I'm sure there is. I feel like there was a Soldier Sailor quote that I really loved, and I'm now going to butcher it trying to think of this. But it was something like, he was always really negative. It wasn't, he didn't say anything, but it was the way he said nothing. Or something like that. I'm absolutely not doing justice to it, but essentially it was something along the lines of, it was the way he said nothing that really bothered me. Being that, like, yeah, this kind of witty line that this man is all in this, not all in this woman's head, but she's frustrated with him for not doing something, but she would be frustrated if he said it as well. If not that, oh, I am terrible at remembering quotes. I think for some, I Contain Multitudes from, oh my God, now Leaves, no, my God. How have I now also forgotten the title? The poetry collection, Leaves. Oh my God. Give me one moment while I quickly remember who exactly this was who said, I Contain Multitudes. It's Walt Whitman from, oh my God, what was that poet? What was that collection called? Some Walt Whitman thing. The leaves. I'm just going to search Walt Whitman leaves and see what comes up. Leaves of Grass. My gosh, Bob. Right, there we go. I Contain Multitudes from Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. I love that collection anyway, but I just love what's essentially otherwise a very saucy and sort of freewheeling collection has this line about I Contain Multitudes, and it feels so powerful. I love that. But yeah, thank you, Callum. As long as you can remember the sentiment of the quote, then that's what matters most. Yeah, that's kind of typically the vibe I'm going for. I can't remember the exact bits, but I remember that I love the way that certain books do certain things. So the sort of snarky quality. Oh, thank you, Roz. Thank you for stopping by, and have a really lovely evening. Some of the snarky quality of some books, or the kind of funny tone that some books have, and Soldier Sailor I thought was so fun, whilst also being really dark, but has some killer lines, and things like that. So yeah, if there are any quotes that you remember that you love, please do pop them in the comments as well. Thank you so much, Robert, as well, saying you do a good job on your channel. I promise that's not just me typing as myself. This is a different Robert, but that's very kind. Thank you, Robert. Atana, is there any character that you feel really connected with? Oh, something's kind of. There was a character in. This is gonna give me a moment on this, because there is a. I think I've been asked something similar before, and I can't remember exactly what came up, but there was one character that was just. I think was it. Oh, it's the name of the book's going to really elude me. There was like a really sensitive child, basically, and it was a little eerie, like watching myself as a child in this book. I want to say it was Susan Hill or someone. It was one of those sort of authors who's got that really delicate touch around writing characters. It will come to me. There is a character where, yeah, this sort of very sensitive child figure really resonated with me, and I remember really rooting for this character. I just wish I could remember for the life of me who they were. This will come back to me. Thank you, Yotana. That's a great question, and I will have a little think on it and come back. I think that may be all of the other ones. There's one other question that I can see that I've not come back to from Roro Reads, which is about talking about other sort of uplifting smaller channels. I think that might be better done when I can sort of sit and write them all down, because I know what will happen if I try and do it off the top of my head is I'll name a couple of people, forget them, and then forget to tag them afterwards. So I'm going to do a separate thing, probably as an end of year, where I uplift a couple of other booktubers out there. Please also do recommend some. Like, there are so many good booktubers out there, and booktube is a weird space, because I think in many other corners of YouTube there is an option, you know, a small booktuber in, for example, makeup might be way bigger than I am, right? They might have like 20,000 subscribers, and that's a small makeup YouTuber, whereas in booktube we're relatively small and niche. So someone like Eric, who I think is on about 30,000, is one of the bigger figures in literary booktube stuff. And then you compare that to like Jack Edwards at like 1 million, whatever. But yeah, so I think there are always, but that's the thing, there are always amazing channels who have very few views or subscribers comparatively, but to, like, you know, the sort of bigger, like the kind of Eric Carl Andersons and the Simon Savages and people like that, and they really love. They really should have a lot more love and attention. So yeah, please do also suggest them if you can, whether in the chat here or in the comments of this video or whatever. I'll probably put out a poll to get some, or like a community post to get a few ideas from people about this, because there are always people. I'm terrible at actually keeping up with BookTube, so there may be many out there that I have never heard of, but that are wonderful. So I'd love that. I feel like, so I've come to the end of those questions. If there are any other questions in the chat, please ignore all the piles of clothes in this room. I'm just going to come over here. But yeah, please do suggest any others if you've got them. Any other questions if you've got them. I'm still trying to think of a good answer for yours, Atana. In some ways, it would be characters from Momo. I'm not quite the plucky. No, here we go. This is who it is. From the Philip Pullman books. What is the trilogy called? The Northern Lights? Yeah, they are Northern Lights, aren't they? The Northern Lights books from Philip Pullman. There was something about Will, the character Will, who I felt really protective over. Like, I don't think he was quite me, but I felt really connected to him, and to Lyra, who I thought was brilliant. Lyra's exactly not who I am. Like, Lyra is like my sister, who was this very like plucky tomboy character who would fight you to do the right thing. I was probably a bit more like Will, be like, what's happening? Why are we here? But also Will has this this real sensitivity, and his sort of superpower or special ability to some degree in his Dark Materials, not Northern Lights, his Dark Materials, his special power in his Dark Materials is to wield this knife where he has to feel the sensitivities between places, like this is how you hold a knife, and the subtle knife indeed, and he is someone I really resonated with, because I thought there's something really special about his character. This slightly, the sensitive soul who kind of wants to approach the world with a degree of optimism. That's kind of who I aspire to be, to some degree. Although if you know the rest of the story, maybe not every element in that, but yeah. But that's where I'd like to see myself as being. That's a character I really resonated with, and I thought those books were so beautiful. Hello, Anna. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're joining all the way from Argentina. It's very kind. Hello, Like an Expert. Hello. So, Like an Expert, very good friend of mine, and also very, very good YouTuber, particularly looking at exam preparation. And there's a lot where I think she just has some really great ideas on how to kind of get people really thinking critically for an exam and things like that as well. So really, really do check her out if that's a thing you need. Hello, we love you, Bobathan. Thank you so much. Hello. Hiya. So lovely to be here. Oh, hi, Joseph. Hello. No, don't worry about being late at all. I'm probably winding down before too long. I'll probably be on for like another 10 minutes or so. But lovely to see you. In case you haven't answered, hi, Kieran. What's the best book of shortlist? Ooh, I'm in need of a holiday reading project. So I don't know how much of this is nostalgia, but the 2005 shortlist is one of my favorites. So that is, oh gosh, let's see what I can remember off the top of my head. So John Banville's The Sea is the winner. Beautiful, really elaborate language. Not for everyone. It was a bit of a strong flavour, but I thought it was really beautiful. Ian McEwan's no, that's a different list with on Chesil Beach, I think. Basically, the 2005 shortlist is a bit of a hard hit, like heavy hitters of literary fiction, particularly from the UK. So it's On Beauty, I think, by Zadie Smith. Let's see how many I can get right off the top of my head. The Accidental by Ali Smith. The Sea. Maybe it is Ian McEwan with On Chesil Beach. Kazuo Shiguro is there with Never Let Me Go. And there's the mystery sixth author who I've forgotten. But I remember that was one of the ones that made me start reading all of the shortlists, because basically I had one book left to read to finish that shortlist. Maybe it's Purple. Maybe it's not On Beauty. Maybe it's Purple Hibiscus. I can't remember. Either way, it's a really, really strong shortlist, I think. Some really heavy hitters from literary fiction. Maybe no. Could it be Sebastian? Not Sebastian. Sebastian Barry. Yeah, is it Sebastian Barry? Is the other book on that list? Either way, very, very strong. So really strong, like British Irish list. What else is good? 2019. I think if we look at the long list of 2019 and we ignore the Testaments, then I think it's a really strong long list. And I think so many of the long lists, like Lanny, or Lost Children Archive, or The Man Who Saw Everything, should have been in the shortlist and should have won. What's an older one that's really good? I want to say, was it 1970? Whichever the one was that had Susan Hill, because I think it was like Susan Hill. It was a four book shortlist, and it was just a lot of really strong, beautiful books. There's some really, really great ones out there. 2005 is the first that comes to mind. I have a personal sense of nostalgia with that list because I was part of a library book club who read almost all of those books without me realizing that they were book list books. I want to say 2014. I think that was Richard Flanagan. I think there was an Ann Tyler, or maybe that was 2015 with A Little Life. 2014 and 2015, I remember both being quite good as well. That's a good older one. 1990, for some reason, strikes me as being a good one, and I can't remember why. Possession by A.S. Byatt. Amongst Women, which I've not read yet, but I've heard is amazing. And I think there's a Brian Moore book in there that's very good. This is such a Kieran question. I was completely fooled thinking this was a really normal question for a bit there. Kieran, thinking of heavy hitters, which Booker winner do you think would have the best uppercuts? Who would be a good prize fighter? Who do I think would go for it? Who he had from the last? I mean, I'm not going to count Margaret Atwood out of a fight. Who would be like? Who do you think would be like a quiet, kind of under the radar person who would then end up being super, super powerful? Okay, Rachel Kushner. I don't know why. I feel like she would just go for a fight. Brandon Taylor, based on his Twitter, because Brandon Taylor in his Twitter is always so like ready to pounce. And when I was thinking of Rachel Kushner, I was thinking about his article that he wrote, where he completely demolished Creation Lake. And I think if you're willing to go that hard on a book in an article, I think he would go into this with some fight. I'd love to see Paul Lynch give it a go. I feel like, you know, Prophet Song has shown us that he is maybe not always the happiest man. So maybe I think he would go for it. Kerry Holm is the true embodiment of an underdog. That's very correct. Iris Murdoch would indeed mess you up. Iris Murdoch would go for it. No, Muriel Spark. Muriel Spark would, not only because her name also sounds like she would be a prize fighter, Muriel Spark would go for you because she's so acerbic in her novels that I think Muriel Spark would see you across a room and there'd be like a Real Housewives moment of her like it'd be like Tiffany Pollard from whatchamacallit? What's his name? Tiffany Pollard from A Shot of Love with Flavor Flav. I think she would, like, if you imagine that kind of reaching for the hair and like tearing off, that is Muriel Spark. Muriel Spark would absolutely knock you out. She would poison your drink. She would emotionally destroy you verbally whilst attacking you. I'm betting on Muriel Spark. this is Ben Ockrey, Kieran is suggesting would batter the competition. Yeah, and Marlon James, both also like, because Marlon James, I think when Kieran and I saw him at a book event, like a lot taller than I thought he would be. Like actually, like physically, like would have an advantage in that sense of being like quite tall, quite broad-shouldered. Bay, I really like this. Yeah, it would be great if you could create a Discord server or something so that if you'd like, we can have voice calls and chat more about books and stuff. Yeah, I've sometimes thought about having a Discord. I was on Kieran's wonderful Discord for a long time, and I stepped away only because I realized I was not even on top of everything else in my life, never mind keeping up to date with the Discord. So I think I'd only start a Discord up if I felt like I could be on top of it, which given life circumstances and just generally 2024 and how it's been, maybe not happening right now. 2025 also doesn't look great. Like, maybe I'll get my life sorted at some point. The eternal dream, and be able to do that. Oh, Alan Hollinghurst. For some reason, Alan Hollinghurst, I would absolutely sweep the floor in a fighting competition. A very quiet and reserved man in many ways, but I also think he'd be very good at like outfoxing the opponent. Plus, I just love Alan Hollinghurst. He's just great. Yeah, there we go. Those are my thoughts on who would win a boxing match. I'm probably going to start wrapping up before too long, unless anybody has any final questions. But it's been lovely chatting to you all. Thank you for putting up with my nonsense for like 2 hours. And particularly because it's quite harsh lighting, because I accidentally messed up and it didn't use the camera there that I think it looks a little less harsh. But there we go. Any final questions from people? If not, all of this is really just to say a massive, massive thank you to people who have been subscribing, whether you've just joined and sort of just started subscribing to me, or whether you've been there since, you know, whenever I started 4 years ago. Kieran actually deserves a special shout out here, because Kieran was like I think maybe before I hit about 100 subscribers, was really there very early on and was a big reason for pushing me in front of other people and for how I got other shout outs and whatever, like including, so Kieran talking about my channel got me in front of Simon Savage, and Simon Savage also got me in front of loads of other people. And I feel incredibly lucky because that's allowed me to just keep growing, even while I just faff about talking about the book. So that's been very, very kind of of everyone to be here. It's still strange to me. I sort of said at the beginning of the live stream. It's still really weird to me that people watch, which I know I put it out there hoping somebody will see it, but it still often does feel like I'm in my room or I'm with a dog talking to my phone or to my laptop about books. And it's kind of surreal to be that this is like real. Particularly, when I've met other booktubers or I've met people who have watched my channel. It's weird, but a lovely weird, but weird. And this is not me. It's not like I'm walking around being like, oh, I'm recognized everywhere I go. I'm such a, paparazzi. No, stop. Oh my God. It's definitely not that. But yeah, it's still sort of strange. But very nice, very, very nice indeed. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Mark. Have a good night as well. Yeah, have a lovely evening, everybody. I'm going to start wrapping up. But it's been so glorious to spend some time with you. Feel free to pop like other booktuber suggestions or whatever in the chat or in the comments of the video proper. And thank you all for joining me as I prattle on at you with terrible lighting, talking at my laptop while I sniffle at you. It's a glorious, sexy combination. But anyway, thank you also so much for being here. Thanks for joining in the chat and everything like that as well. I feel very, very lucky to be able to just keep chatting away about books on here and to have such lovely people to talk to as well. So have a lovely evening or day or whatever it is you're doing, and speak to you all very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care. Have a lovely, lovely time. I'm just going to slowly close off now. This is always, I know I say this literally every time with a live stream. I forget that there are a couple of extra buttons to press to actually close something. And so I'll sort of say goodbye and then, like I'm doing now, faff about here. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Thank you. And oh, some lovely comments in the chat there. Thank you. Cheers, everybody. Have a lovely, lovely evening or day or whatever it is you're doing. Bye-bye. Thank you all so much for being part of me being here.